turn up the volume and free your mind, because this is the Humans 2.0 podcast, hosted by Mark Metry. What you feed your mind every day will shape your future. Listening to this podcast will strengthen your mind, thoughts, and beliefs. Leave behind the everyday mundane trivialities of your average human version 1.0 and meta learn your way into becoming a human version 2.0 with a new upgraded guest in each episode. Enjoy.
Welcome to episode 37 of the Humans 2.0 podcast. This is your host, Mark Metry. Today's episode features Dr. Jack Pransky, author of several books and the Center for Inside Out Understanding. Jack has devoted his life to an understanding of three spiritual facts that together create our human experience moment to moment. By gaining a deep understanding of how these three spiritual facts of universal mind, consciousness, and thought work within all of us to create either well-being or the opposite, people naturally tend to live at higher levels of consciousness. When people come to understand the three principles, they discover naturally a way to tap the human spirit to create constructive change, a way to bring out the best in people, a way for us to realize the natural mental health that is our birthright and how we keep ourselves from seeing it, a way to move people to well-being and away from problems, a way to draw out internal resilience, and a way to prevent community problems from the inside out. Thank you so much for listening, and I just want to say this episode doesn't have the greatest audio quality, but I assure you by next episode it will be fixed. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. Jack, how do you spend your time on planet Earth?
Pretty much like everybody else. I live through the eyes of something called the three principles: mind, consciousness, and thought. And I'm either connected with, like I'm aware of that, creating my experience of life all the time, the interplay of those things, or I'm forgetting about it and caught up in a blind spot or something, and I'm not seeing those play out in my life. And then I'll eventually catch on and get back on track, hopefully. So.
Yeah, that's I like that answer. So Jack, how did you get started with all this? What's the origin story of Jack Pransky? Why are you doing this?
I bumped into a guy named Sydney Banks who blew my mind apart. He had had an enlightenment experience himself, and I was just minding my business, and I was involved in the prevention of problem behaviors. And someone invited me to a conference that Roger Mills, who worked in a low-income community with the stuff that he learned from Sydney Banks, was doing. And he brought with him a couple of the women from the housing project that he totally turned around. And when I heard them talk, it just did something to me, because these were people who had, they were beating their kids, severely alcoholic, crack addicts, and their lives were totally turned around, and you could tell that they would never go back to the way that they were. Like something had shifted so fundamentally in their head. And I thought, oh, this is head and shoulders above anything that I had been doing in prevention. So that's how I got interested. And then, so I tried to write a book about what was happening down there in the Modello housing project, and the book is called Modello. And in the process of doing that, I tracked down Sydney Banks, and because I knew he was the inspiration, and I eventually had a meeting with him, and that's where he blew my mind apart. And I have not been able to turn back since.
So before that,
moment when you heard it, did you ever hear these things before, but maybe like in a different way, but you just still didn't register?
Well, I would say I was involved in a spiritual search. And I certainly had heard people talk about universal mind, which is really the energy behind all life, or its pure spirit, or some people would even think of it as God. Certainly in that realm, you hear things about that. And I certainly heard about consciousness, which I see now as the power to experience life and to be aware of whatever we're experiencing. And I never thought about consciousness in those terms before. And then there's the power of thought, which is our creative gift that we can think anything. And what happens is that anything we think, like if we get a thought of, this person is doing something bad to me, and we get a feeling of anger, it's because consciousness is picking up that thought and throwing it right back to us. And that's what is giving us our feeling. So it's not like this feeling comes from whatever's happening in the outside world. It's coming from us, from within ourselves, from our own creation, which is our own thinking. And when people catch on to the fact that there's nothing in the outside world that can make us feel anything, it's always our own thinking about what's going on in the outside world, that's when things shift within us and people change. It's a real wrench.
Yeah. So Jack, what is consciousness? Like, obviously we know of to be conscious, like to be aware, and then there is like consciousness, right? Like we are aware of ourselves being aware. What is that? Is that our mind, or?
Oh, it's beyond our minds, because there's consciousness in the whole universe. And it's tough to talk about it. I mean, there really are no words to describe it. I see it as like a fundamental, almost a web that is what holds life together. And it's pure awareness. Like it's beyond just our own awareness. And it's almost like we tap into this web, and we borrow from it in a sense to have our own consciousness. But our consciousness would be pure. It would come into us in a pure way with nothing contaminating it, because it's like the oneness of universal mind would come into us. And then we get to use our power of thought to contaminate it to varying degrees. So if we get a thought of worry, we'll drop from that state, to a certain level, and we'll get the feeling of worry at that level. And if we get a thought of, violence, we will drop way down. If we get a thought of depression or suicide, we'll drop way down. If we get a thought of gratefulness, we're right up there. Get a thought of compassion, we're pretty close to the top. Love, so everything has levels of consciousness, and we get to experience it however we think about it.
So that's really good. I was listening to this TED Talk, and basically this guy was talking about consciousness, and he was trying to come at it from a science perspective. And he was saying that basically nobody, in the science community has any idea what consciousness actually is. And he was he kind of had a new thought, and it was, your consciousness is a controlled hallucination. And like, what he means by that is, animals are conscious, but they're not like humans. They don't have consciousness. And, long story short, he said that science didn't really have an answer for this, but he's saying that maybe, whatever it is ourselves, we adapted, we kind of created this in our heads as to advance us in like biological evolution. Because like if we have consciousness, we have a sense of meaning. Like we are more likely to do things, and we have a story in our head. What are your thoughts on that? Have you ever heard that before?
Well, what I would, there's something about it I would agree with, and there's something about it I would disagree with. What I agree with is that what we see as life is really our own creation of illusion. We have the gift of the power of thought to create anything. And whatever we create will look real to us. And we will, because it comes through all of our senses. So we'll be able to, we'll see it, we'll smell it, we'll taste it, we'll touch it, and we'll hear it. And it's really just our own thinking, because we never know what's really in the outside world. We only take in the outside world through our own thinking. It's our own creation of what we see in the outside world. So in that sense, he's right that we are creating this illusion that he is called, what did you say he called it?
A controlled hallucination.
Yeah, it's hallucination, if you will. And it's really hard to wrap your head around that. I mean, because things certainly look solid. We're talking on this through this computer, it certainly looks solid. And yet, even that, if we took an electron microscope to it, we would see that it's mostly empty space. And so we are constructing the fact that it's a solid object when it's really this energy in a different form that is being held together somehow, and we are making up inadvertently what it is. So in that sense, I think he's absolutely right. But when he says that animals don't have consciousness, I would disagree with that tremendously. I think even trees have consciousness. And probably even rocks have consciousness, because even though they look like solid objects to us, if we were to take an electron microscope to them, we would see that they too are mostly empty space, and there's energy dancing in there. And, it's tough to know exactly what these things are, but it's life. It's the energy of life coming into these different forms. And there's consciousness behind all of life. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah.
But what's important to us is that if we are feeling depressed, we are making it up. That's very humbling. If we're angry at somebody, we are making it up. We're the ones, we could see that person all the way from love to hate, and all these levels in between, no matter what they're doing. Who decides this? We do. Not consciously. Most of the thoughts that we have we're not aware of in our conscious mind, but behind the scenes, those kinds of thoughts are going on. So if I'm mad at you, I'm seeing you as a particular person. I've got my own judgments of what a person should be like. I've got my thoughts about what you're doing to me and whatever that is. And it's all a jumbled mess in here. And then you come along and you like fit into that somehow. And then that is all why I'm getting anger toward you.
Mm.
I've made the whole business up inadvertently.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because the average human has, what is it, like 60,000 thoughts a day. And, some of those thoughts are crazy. It doesn't matter who you are, and I don't think, no matter how, successful you are, I still think, bad thoughts or thoughts that aren't yours still come out. How do we, how do we get our thoughts more in order if it's possible, right? Because before a thought happens, there's no origination point. The thought just happens. You can't stop a thought.
Yeah, I don't know about anybody else, but I can't control my thoughts. I mean, I can probably control about 5% of my thoughts. I can come up with, but otherwise they just pop into your head. So there's nothing we can do about that. We don't have the power to change that. What we do have the power to do is to know what we're going to do with those thoughts when they get there. So we could take them seriously with other thoughts, or we could let them wash off of us like water rolling off a duck's back. We could take them to heart. We could just see them as illusions. We could do anything with them. And we have the free will to do anything with them. And we're the ones who decide inadvertently what to do with them. And to me, it all comes down to what serves us well. I don't think it serves us well to be in an angry or upset or depressed state a lot. Certainly everybody drops down there from time to time, and there's no problem with that, but there is a problem with staying there, because it hurts ourselves.
Yeah. So just like you said, depression and anxiety and these things, they're more or less caused by the person themselves, and that means they can also help them out. So I had this psychotherapist on the podcast, and she was talking about people
Let my phone ring because I'm not going to answer it. Sorry.
Okay.
Should go off in a moment. Sorry about that.
No problem. All right. So I had this psychotherapist on the show earlier, and she talked about people being in these like trances, and it's basically just a repetition of their own thoughts, of whatever rumination, whatever story is running on a repeat in their head. Is that what is that? Are those like your thoughts, like just repetition of pattern, or is it is there an actual reason you're having these thoughts, right? Like we talk a lot about, depression and anxiety, but maybe that means, you might be doing something that you don't want to be doing, or maybe it means you're in a situation that you shouldn't be in a situation. Is it sometimes better to actually listen to your thoughts, or not listen to your thoughts, excuse me, but to accept those thoughts as more serious? Or is the goal to just allow all thoughts to come in and you're just, observing them, if that makes sense?
Well, there's no goal really.
Mm-hmm.
It's knowing how everything really works. So I would say that probably what's going on is we all get habits of thinking. As we're growing up, our parents tell us things and they treat us in a certain way, and we're very observant of that, and we take that in with our own thinking and come up with something about ourselves. And we see ourselves in a certain way because of that. But it's all our own thinking that's making that happen. But we will get into habits of thinking because of that. And sometimes those habits get repeated over and over and over and over again. And I think that's why we tend to get ourselves into a lot of trouble, is because we take what's behind those habits, even though we're not really seeing or aware that much of what's behind the habits, but that has become life to us, and that's reality to us. And yet we don't realize that we're only making up that reality with our own thinking. And the reason it feels the way it does is we get seduced by consciousness through the senses, so we feel it. So I think that's where it comes from. But as far as, if we get a thought, I could observe my thinking instead of getting caught in it. The question is, would that serve us well? I would think that would serve us better than being caught in the thought. But if I told somebody, you should observe your thinking, they might have all kinds of thinking about that, and it might not serve them well. So what serves us well? Does it serve us to get caught in our thinking? And, like we go down the rabbit hole and, it's like a grip on our necks. Is that what's serving us well? Or does it serve us well to see that it's really only just thought doing its thing, and it doesn't really mean anything unless we make it mean something to us? And that's very comforting. And not only that thing that I was talking about earlier about that we have this pure consciousness in us, we are already everything that we are looking for. We are pure peace, pure love, and pure wisdom. And we can only think ourselves away from it. And I can't see a picture of myself right now, so I don't know whether you can see this, but can you see that?
Bring it down a little bit.
Bring it down.
Yeah, like the camera a little bit, or lift yourself more up. Yeah, there we go.
So there's this. So we've got mind, consciousness, and thought here, and working together, and this is the pure state, like pure consciousness coming from pure universal mind. Peace, love, and wisdom are built into the picture. Then we get a thought. It drops us down on these levels. Thoughts of ego, thoughts of fear, thoughts of beliefs. You could fill in your own here. That's what drops us down in these levels. So anytime we get a thought, consciousness is going to pick us up, send us to one of these levels, and we end up living in the feeling of that. That's how it works. That's always what goes on.
Jack, what is ego?
Ego is an image of self-importance. And ego is something that makes us take this form that we exist in this life very, very seriously. Fear comes out of ego. We're trying to protect it. Our insecurities come from ego.
But at the same time, we need ego, right?
Well, depends what you mean. What do we need it for?
Survival.
If you're talking about making this form, like the form of Jack Pransky, survive in the world, and that means something, then yes.
So in terms of because I've heard of that like ego and this stuff. It's good to have a balance of it in terms of like getting goals done and getting things done in the world. You kind of have to have that sense of self. What
if we just allowed wisdom to help us decide what we needed to do and what we didn't.
Mm. And I think it's
to preserve ourselves in order to do that.
I see. And I think it's like you brought up an interesting point earlier, and it was like we repeat the thoughts that we've heard when we were younger, when we were growing up, around the people around us. And I think it's really interesting now to see, now everyone has a cell phone in their pocket, right? And like kids these days are they're basically spending most of their days on their phone. Like when I'm in public and I'm walking around, they're spending most of their days. There's obviously negatives to that, but at the same time, that could be a positive for somebody if they live in a house that's not with the greatest parents and it's kind of abusive, and they just use their phone to break out of their cultural reality tunnel to say, listen to some podcasts, watch some things that might get them interested. That's I think it's interesting to like bring up technology in terms of consciousness these days, because it's like the rate of which we're getting information and where is changing, and I think that's definitely making a difference.
Yeah, but see, technology is in the outside world, and we take in technology through our thinking. And so if we use it as, like, if we have thoughts of escape, the question is that serving us well?
Yeah.
Most cases I would say it doesn't. If we use technology with our thinking to enhance learning or to become aware of things beyond our little sphere, then I would say that is serving us well. But it's thoughts that determine that. Always.
Yeah. But like, what I'm saying is maybe it's a good thing for somebody to escape from a reality that's going on. Like they don't have good parents, and if they don't have good parents, then they don't have good thoughts, and that's all they know. And that is their life, and they're being molded into a not great person. Maybe what I'm saying is that maybe it might be better for them to escape, even though escapism is not a good thing, obviously, but maybe it is better in that situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if it serves them, yes. But here's what I've noticed from working with people. I work with a lot of adults. And for example, there was a woman who was getting yelled at all the time when she was a kid. Really horrible stuff was being yelled at her from her parents. And she did use not technology to escape, but she used books to escape. And she would go and take her book and get into a closet and like block out the entire world. Well, that was very helpful to her at the time. But then she grows up and she's not with her parents anymore. And she still takes a habit with her of whenever anything gets tense, she tends to block out the world and go into her little shell. At some point along the way, that stopped serving her well. And that happens a lot.
I think a part of that is just like, this stuff is all really, it's really hard for people to understand. And, life has so many moving parts. I've noticed one of the key themes is balance. Everything is paradoxical, in a way. And it's just about, trying to get a good balance. Reading is a good thing, but if you go overboard and you use it as escape, that's not good,
Yeah, exactly. And it's our thinking that determines that.
Yeah.
But just to take all of this down to a very practical level. Like I was working with a heroin addict one time, and she said the thing that helped her most was when she realized that she didn't have to follow every thought that came into her head. Because she would get a thought, I have to use. And she would feel it. It would like be in her bones that she would have to go after it. But when she realized that she didn't really have to go after it, it was just a thought. Changed everything for her. That's the power of this stuff.
I think something that's helped me with understanding that those are really just thoughts, just things that happen in my mind, is mindfulness meditation has been really good, because it teaches you, the thoughts still come, but it teaches you to, kind of understand that they're just thoughts, and, they're probably not that serious. And that's been really good. Are there any other things that you can maybe recommend for people to do to help them out with that?
Well, I'll say two things about it. First of all, people who try to meditate sometimes get lost in the trying, and it doesn't necessarily serve them well. People who are taking a walk are not involved in the practice of meditation might get into a meditative state. It's the meditative state that is really helpful and really important. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the practice of meditation that does it for people. But if that serves you well, that's great. There was one other thing I wanted to say about that. What else did you ask me about it?
I asked you, what are other things that people could maybe do?
That's the other thing. Yeah, thank you. I would say that it would be helpful for people to look in the direction of how our experience gets created. And I know it's self-serving for me to say this, but I wrote a book called Somebody Should Have Told Us. And I think that's an easy book for people to see how it works. And I would recommend looking in this direction. If you don't want to look in terms of my books, which is fine, there are lots of other books out there that have been written on the 3 principles nowadays. And you can find them.
Yeah, keep learning, keep on going on the journey, and you'll find the answers. Jack, thank you so much for coming on the show. Are there any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
I think the most important thing is to realize, I'm going to underscore what I said before, we are already peace, love, and wisdom. That's what people really want in life. Peace and love, and to be guided by wisdom. And that we wouldn't be having all the problems we have in the world today if we did. And I hate to say this, but no, I won't say it. I was gonna make a comment about our president, but I won't.
Go for it, man.
No, I won't. All right. So it's just that we are already everything that we're looking for, and we can only get in its way with our own thinking.
100%. Jack, thanks again for coming on the show. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Mark Metry, host of the Humans 2.0 podcast.
Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to the Humans 2.0 podcast. There are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and you chose to listen to this. Please subscribe, share, and tell a friend about Humans 2.0 so they can improve as well. If you loved listening to that, I would love your feedback, whether you're watching this on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, and anything else. Keep learning on the Humans 2.0 podcast.